Okay, this is a video where we're going to look at a practice problem for a pedigree, and I want you to tell me what type of inheritance pattern it is. Then we're going to do a quick pickup topic at the end, which is known as linkage or chromosomal linkage. So pause the video and see if you can answer these questions, and when we come back, we'll see how you did. All right, welcome back. Which members of the family are afflicted with Huntington's disease? So remember, we used the Roman numeral 1 and then the Arabic number indicate that in generation 1, we've got person number 1. In generation 2, we have person 2, 3, and 7. And in generation 1, 2, 3, we have person 3. There are no carriers for Huntington's disease. You either have it or you don't. With this in mind, is Huntington's disease caused by a dominant or recessive trait? So we're not skipping generations. We have no carriers. So this is going to be autosomal dominant. How many children did individuals Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2 have? They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many girls did 2, 1 and 2, 2 have? So we're talking about this person and this person. They have 2 daughters and 1 has Huntington's disease. How are individuals number Roman numeral 3, 2 and 3, 4 related? They are, so this is, their mothers are brother and sister, so they would be cousins. And Roman numeral 1, 2, and Roman numeral 3, 5. So that would be a grandparent. All right, so hopefully you did pretty well with that. Before I move on to linkage, I just want to talk about Huntington's disease. It is an autosomal dominant. If you have it, what happens is you don't know, well, today we do because we have genetic testing, but back in olden days, you wouldn't find out until you were in your mid-20s. And so by then you could have had children. And if you have a copy, when you're in your mid-20s, your neurons, your nerve cells begin to degenerate and you eventually die because your nerve cells can't cause your muscles to contract, and you need muscles for your heart to beat and for your diaphragm to breathe. So what would happen is they would die. But because they lived long enough to reproduce, the trait did not get evolutionarily selected against, and so it continued. Now, today, if somebody has it, everybody gets genetically tested, and so you know before you have kids whether or not you have it. It'll be interesting to see if over time this causes Huntington's disease to diminish. The last thing I want to talk about on this video, we've just gotten a little blurb on the next page. We've got this gal who has red hair and freckles, and it says linkage on autosomal chromosomes. If you remember back in the last 2 chapters ago, when we talked about meiosis, we said when chromosomes line up in the tetrad, so if we've got chromosomes in a tetrad, so we had like this, and these are copied homologous chromosomes. And remember, 2 of them are going to go to one cell and 2 are going to go to the other. But we said what can happen here is they can cross over. There is crossing over. And we're getting ready to talk about why are we different. We're getting ready to talk about variation. Well, one of the ways we get variation is this crossing over. These pieces will break off and they'll swap. So you'll get a swappage. So it's supposed to be an arrow of those 2 pieces from chromosome to chromosome. And this should be random. We assume this is random. But sometimes it's not. Remember the law of segregation and independent assortment say, actually it would be segregation says the genes separate randomly randomly from one another. One gene doesn't affect the other. But sometimes we get something called linkage. And linkage is when 2 alleles on a chromosome lie directly next to each other. So they never separate. So the result is they never separate. This violates law of segregation, but it happens. And an example of that is the gene for freckles. So the freckle gene and the red hair gene. If you look on a chromosome, one is here and then the other is here. And so if there's crossing over, these two genes stay together, they never separate. And that's why a lot of times, if you have red hair, you also have freckles. It's an example of what we call linkage. And this happens mostly on autosomal chromosomes. You could have linkage on X chromosomes too. But it's a way that it circumvents our variety. Remember, everything's supposed to be random and everything's supposed to always be independent of each other. But this is one exception where the two genes will stay together. And there's other examples of linkage, but this is the most common. All right, for the second half of this chapter, we're going to go to a different turn, and we're going to look at where variation. So remember, when we talk about differences, we're talking about variation. We're going to talk about where variation comes from, again, what we already know, and then some new ways we get variation. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about those new ways, the new sources of variation. All right, on to part 2 of this chapter. All for now.